My name is Sidna Arbuckle. My maiden name was Davis. I was born in Elgin. I was wed in Elgin, and I'm sure I'll be buried in Elgin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Audio Elgin podcast. This podcast has been created by the Elgin Historical Association to tell the stories of our city through those who have lived them. I'm your host, Abigail Fritz, and today I'll be speaking with an Elgin native and a longtime member of the Historical Association, Sidna Arbuckle. Could you start by telling me where you were born?
I was born here on September the 18th, 1939, in Fleming Hospital, and Dr. Fleming was my mother's doctor. My dad was raised here in Elgin. My mother was raised in Eastland, Texas. My granddad on my mother's side was the district judge in Eastland. And of course, Eastland County was one of the first oil boom towns in Texas. My daddy was raised here in Elgin in a very large family. He was one of 10. One of Dad's oldest brothers was a Baptist pastor, and he happened to have been pastor of a small church in Eastland County. And Daddy stopped through one day to visit his brother, and his brother said, well, he had to go to a funeral. And he asked my daddy, why didn't he come along with him? Well, he did, and there was a good-looking pianist there. So the daddy was never very bashful. He went and asked if he could take the pianist home. It upset everybody that mother would go off with a strange man from a strange part of Texas. Anyhow, they met at a funeral, and a year later, they were married. My daddy was an automobile mechanic, and they moved to Elgin, and I was born a year after they arrived in Elgin.
Do you have any siblings?
I have a sister, Judy Davis, who is 3 years younger than me. Daddy was in school at the Arsenal in Rock Island, Illinois, and she was born while we lived there for a short time. And so we have never let Judy forget that she is a Yankee living in Texas.
What are some of the differences between Elgin as it was when you were a child and Elgin today?
I was thinking as I was driving down here today about the telephones. And when I was young, and I mean young, probably earlier than being 6 years old, I remember we had the party line system here in Elgin, and you would ring, and a friend might have two longs and one short ring, and that's how they would answer. And when we had the dial system come in, that was really uptown for us. One thing that I enjoyed back then was the grocery delivery. I could call up on the telephone and say, I need 3 pounds of this and that, and I won't be home. You come in and you put it in the refrigerator, and that really helped out. That's coming back, curbside service at the grocery stores now.
Yeah.
So things are kind of going full circle that way. I guess the thing that I appreciate the most now, and for the last 20 or 30 years, is air conditioning. Since I'm talking the second day of August, it does get rather warm here.
How did you beat the heat when you were kids and you didn't have that AC?
Well, we all had what we called a sleeping porch. It was screened in, and we would sleep out there in the summertime. We would sweat an awfully lot. We really liked taking shower baths in the yard with a water hydrant. If we didn't know any better, we were able to cope. But when air conditioning started coming in and everything, we really wanted that.
I bet.
Did your family have any customs or traditions that were particularly meaningful to you?
I guess the one thing that I learned so much from was going to my grandparent Davis's on Sunday afternoon. We were expected to be there, and we sat on the front porch. And my granddad had a small truck farm, and it's on the old MacDade Road. And through the years, it has been known as the Davis Edition. We would sit on that front porch, and the other brothers and sisters of my dad would come, and traffic would go in front of us. And so when they saw a car, they saw somebody, they had something to remember about that person. And my mind has been one that I could remember a lot of things. And so that is the way I was first introduced to the population of Elgin.
Can you tell me about high school? What did you do for fun as a teenager?
I was not the busiest teenager. We lived next to the high school on Avenue C. And so anything that was going on at school, we knew what was going on. Being a Baptist, we were not allowed to participate in a lot of things. Now, I played for dances on the piano, but I never learned to dance myself. I can remember our house had one of the first TV antennas in Elgin. We got our TV when I was in the 6th grade. And at that time, Austin didn't even have a channel. So we had a very high antenna, and we would hope late at night we could get a program from maybe San Antonio or Austin. So as far as what did I do as a teenager? My daddy said I drove up and down Main Street. He had the car agency, and I always had a new car at my disposal if it was approved by my parents, but also the used cars. And so Daddy said all I did was drive up and down Main Street and wear out the tires. And Daddy was smart enough that he would go out and check the speedometer as I took the car out. And so there better not be more than 45 miles tonight. When we look back on it, and our kids think it was a very dull life, but we thought we were very busy.
You said that you played the piano. Did your mother teach you?
No, she started me very young in piano. And so I started playing the piano for church when I was 9 years old. About the time I was 12 or 13, Mother took me to Austin for a year to take organ. And I certainly could play the organ, and I have all over Central Texas, but I have never been as comfortable on it or have it mastered like I did the piano.
In the Elgin Etc. book, which was published by the Historical Association and is comprised of short stories by Elgin residents, you wrote about the memorable wedding that you played at. Could you tell me that story?
The wedding was for Mary Wayne Nairn and Sam Wood. And Mary Wayne and I had started to school together. We had gone through 12 years of school. She went to North Texas and got her teaching degree, whereas I only went to college for a year and came home and married the hometown boyfriend. But anyhow, when she married, it was in the summer of 1962. And she asked me to please play the organ for her wedding. And I said, well, of course I would. They had the rehearsal in the morning, and this was at the old Central Christian Church. And when I went in to turn on the organ, somebody was already in the church, and they said, you be careful. There's a bat hanging on the organ. I made a fast exit out of the church. And Mr. Nairn came in, and he got the bat, and we thought everything was okay. That afternoon, the wedding was about 6 o'clock, and my mother and daddy were in attendance, and they had my daughter with them, Rhonda. And I looked out as I was playing, and Rhonda was waving at me and everything. And all of a sudden, I heard something, and I heard people getting up, And I looked up, and there was a swarm of bats in the church just flying everywhere. They went in the back and found the janitor's brooms and brushes, and here they were fighting, all for a very formal wedding. That was over with. Didn't think a thing about it. And my cousin then, that I was very close to, was getting married in June of 1964. And he was marrying in Clifton, Texas. And I went and had Rhonda, the daughter, sitting next to me. And I sat near the back because a 3-year-old girl, you never know what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the wedding started, and the bridesmaids came down the aisle, and it was time for the bride to come. And we all stood up as we were told to do. And Rhonda, in her very loud 3-year-old voice, said, "But Mommy, where are those birdies?" And she thought bats flew at every wedding. So we quickly explained to her that bats were not a part of the wedding. So that's my story of one of the things that I have experienced in my music.
How did you get involved with historical research in the association?
When Elgin had its centennial, I found out that there was no documented history of Elgin. It was just these stories.
Mm-hmm.
A group came together, and they said, well, they would write a book, a history book. And they started out, and they did a great job of trying to get the history for the first 100 years in Elgin. One thing they did do was come to me, and I was a very young mother at the time, and asked me if I would write a pageant and have it presented as part of the centennial. Well, I did, and it was very successful. And that's when I discovered that we really needed the history written,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily for the legal aspects, but people wanted to know where they came from. People wanted to know, had there ever been anything tried like that in Elgin? History, you cannot go forward unless you know the background. And that is what I have tried to do.
Do you have an interest in your own family history?
My husband's family is a very old family in the area because his great-grandfather was Jonathan Burleson. The town of Elgin is on the Jonathan Burleson League and the Thomas Christian League. I think it was 1830, 1831. Jonathan Burleson was given 1,100 acres from the government of Mexico through the Stephen F. Austin land grants. And so the depot is on part of the Burleson land grant.
And that is where this is being recorded right now.
Yes, yes. On the other side of his family, the great-great-grandfather was a San Jacinto veteran. My Davis family came here in 1884 from South Carolina. My grandfather Davis was a brick mason. He laid the brick on 14 of the buildings in Elgin right now. And I look up and see the designs of the brick along the top and everything.
Yeah.
And I wonder if Papa Davis had something to do in the design or only in the work. And my great-great-grandfather wrote the book describing Yellowstone Park, fur trader. And he's the one that named the geysers and did all this and that. So it is very important, I think, that children know where they came from.
Yeah.
And mine just happened to not have quite the love for history that I do, but they're not old enough yet.
Yeah.
Anyhow, as I started out with, I was born in Elgin, I was wed in Elgin, and I'm sure I will be buried in Elgin.
That was Sidna Arbuckle, speaking about her life and her connections to Elgin's history. I'd like to say a big thank you to her for being on this podcast and to all of you who are listening. If you would like to hear more stories like this, hit that like and subscribe button and tune in next week for the next episode of Audio Elgin. To see our social media, Follow the links in the description below. Or come join us at the Elgin Depot Museum, which is open Wednesdays through Fridays from 10 to 2.